My name is Charlotte, and I can still hear the sound of porcelain cups clinking against saucers that day, the faint jazz humming through the cafe, and the weight of a moment that broke me clean in half. I had barely stepped inside when he spoke. No hesitation, no warmth. Just 7 words delivered like a surgeon's cut. I can't marry you, Charlotte. My body froze. My pulse thundered. I remember staring at the cappuccino sitting untouched before him, the steam fading as if even the drink had grown tired of waiting. I forced myself into the chair across from him, palms slick with sweat, and whispered, "What are you talking about?" His tone was flat, almost rehearsed. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a small velvet box on the table. Not to give me something, to take something back. The engagement ring, a family heirloom, his grandmother's pride. I slipped it off with trembling hands, laid it gently on the polished wood, and tried to hold myself together long enough to escape before anyone noticed my world collapsing. My throat was tight, my chest burning, but I managed 4 words. "Thank you for honesty." Then I walked, past the curious glances, past the couple sharing cheesecake, past everything I thought I knew about love. The second I turned the corner onto Elm Street, the tears came. Not quiet tears. The kind that rip your chest open. 16 days from the wedding. 16 days from the life I thought I was stepping into. And with one sentence, he erased it. I wanted to run back to our apartment, bury myself in the familiar, but I couldn't. The thought of the half-packed boxes and the white dress hanging like a ghost in the closet was unbearable. Still I went, because where else could I go? When I opened the door, I stopped breathing. My things, my clothes, my books, my toiletries were already packed into neat suitcases lined by the wall, tagged and labeled like shipments waiting for a courier. Jason wouldn't have done this. He was never that careful. It had his mother's hands all over it. I sank onto the hardwood floor beside those bags. My lease on my old studio was gone. I had passed it to a nursing student a few weeks earlier. Every cent I had scraped together was tied up in deposits and wedding expenses. My bank account held less than $100. And payday was still 7 long days away. That was the moment the truth landed. I wasn't just abandoned. I was homeless. A return to sender nobody. I don't know how long I sat there, knees pulled up to my chest, arms wrapped tight, waiting for the spinning in my head to stop. My body wanted to crumble, but something inside me whispered, "You cannot disappear here. Not like this." So I did the only thing left. I reached for the number I hadn't dialed in over a year. Margaret, my foster mom. She answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was the same warm, steady, like a fireplace in the dead of winter. "Charlotte, honey, where have you been? I was about to call you about those shoes we looked at last week." I tried to speak but choked on the sob instead. That was all it took. She didn't press for details. She simply said, "Come home." An hour later, I was curled up on her faded plaid couch, peppermint tea cradled in my hands, her fingers smoothing my hair the same way she had when I was 13, and another foster placement had broken me. She didn't ask questions. She just tucked a heavy knit blanket around my legs and whispered, "Stay as long as you need. You hear me? You've got nothing to prove." I stared at the ceiling that night, unable to close my eyes. Jason's voice kept replaying the calmness, the ease with which he discarded me. Had he ever loved me, or was I just a placeholder until someone with a name like Langley appeared? By sunrise, the ache had shifted into something heavier shame. I was 28 years old. I was supposed to be on the edge of a new life. Instead, I was back at the start, heartbroken, homeless, humiliated. But I made myself a promise as the first light slid through the blinds of Margaret's living room. This was not going to be the end of my story. The next morning, I forced myself out of bed, showered, and put on clean clothes from one of the suitcases. My hands still trembled as I zipped my jacket. I kept hearing his voice, those 7 words that shattered everything, and every time I replayed them, my stomach twisted. But I had to move. If I stayed frozen, I would drown. When I reached the hospital, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the smell of antiseptic filled the air. Nurses smiled at me. Some asked about the wedding plans. I smiled back. I lied. I said it had been postponed. I said Jason had a business trip. Every false word scraped my throat, raw, but I refused to let them see me bleed. Inside, I was collapsing. The truth was too heavy, but pretending gave me something to hold on to. If I kept going through the motions, maybe the pain wouldn't swallow me whole. During my shift, I moved from room to room with a mask of calm. Patients trusted me. Families leaned on me. I couldn't break in front of them. Yet every time I checked a chart, every time I adjusted a monitor, I wondered how long I could keep this charade alive. 3 days passed, slow, aching. Nights blurred into mornings. Each hour felt stretched thin like I was walking on glass. The thought of Jason and Megan toasting champagne somewhere just across the state line haunted me. I wanted to scream. But instead, I kept my head down and smiled when people asked. And then on the third day, a shift happened. Rachel, the charge nurse, leaned into the room where I was checking vitals. Still looking for a miracle escape from this place, she asked bluntly. I blinked, unsure if I heard right. What? She motioned for me to step into the hallway. Remember Lily from Neuro? She took a private care job a month ago. Live-in. High pay. She quit last week. Couldn't handle the guy. What guy, I asked. Rachel raised her brows. Some rich tech mogul. Paralyzed. Lives in one of those mansions up in Cypress Hill. Word is he's a nightmare. But, she lowered her voice, it pays triple what we make here. Live-in suite, meals included, no night shifts, just one patient. I hesitated. My instinct was to say no. I wasn't a private caregiver. I was a nurse. I'm not trained for... She cut me off. You've been a nurse for 5 years. You're more qualified than half the people they've had. And trust me, stubborn is exactly what this guy needs. Everyone else quits. You might be the one who doesn't. Her words struck something inside me. Stubborn. Maybe that was all I had left. I didn't laugh. I didn't even smile. But deep down, something shifted. The word escape kept echoing in my head. Escape from the hospital. Escape from this town. Escape from Jason's shadow. Do you have a contact? I asked finally. 10 minutes later, Rachel pressed a small card into my hand, a name written in sharp cursive. Margaret Temple, estate manager, beneath it a number. That night, long after my shift, I stood in the alley outside Margaret's house, my breath turning to mist in the cold air. My phone shook in my hand as I dialed. The line clicked. A crisp voice answered on the second ring. Yes. This is Charlotte Carter, I said. I was told there's a position for a live-in nurse. A pause. Then are you available for an interview tomorrow morning at 9? My knees almost buckled. Yes, I can be there. Bring your credentials and references. The address will be texted. Do not be late. The line went dead. I stared at my phone screen, heart pounding. Tomorrow. A chance. A way out. At 4:30 in the morning, I boarded the earliest flight out of Helena. By the time the regional shuttle climbed into the hills of Cyprus, I pressed my forehead against the glass and watched as the world I had known disappeared behind me. The streets grew narrower, the houses larger, until finally the city fell away and the cliffside rose before me. That was when I saw it. The mansion looked like something carved out of light and stone. Glass walls, steel beams, sharp edges that gleamed under the morning sun. A black gate swung open as if swallowing the cab whole. I wanted to tell the driver to turn around. I wanted to run, but it was too late. I had stepped into a different story now, and I couldn't tell if it would save me or destroy me. Before I continue, let me pause for a moment. If you've ever had your world collapse in one moment, you'll understand what I felt. And if you're here listening to my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next part of this journey. Margaret Temple met me at the front door the next morning. She was in her 60s, sharp as steel, her hair pulled into a knot so tight it looked like it could cut glass. Her navy suit had not a wrinkle, and her gaze scanned me from head to toe as if she were evaluating a soldier, not a nurse. You're early, she said flatly. I didn't want to be late. Good. No smile. No welcome. She turned on her heel, and I followed my suitcase bumping against the marble floor. The interior was vast, cold, and expensive. Polished stone stretched beneath chandeliers. Corridors disappeared into silence. It felt less like a home and more like a fortress. The interview was swift, almost surgical. She scanned my resume, asked 4 questions about medication management, physical therapy, and confidentiality, then leaned back in her chair. The position is yours, terms are simple, round-the-clock availability, 2 days off per month, no visitors, meals and lodging included, salary $12,000 monthly, performance bonus possible, discretion is non-negotiable. I gripped the chair arms, forcing myself not to laugh in disbelief. Triple my hospital salary, a number that could save me from drowning. I accept, I said. Her lips barely twitched. Sign here. She slid the contract across the table. The name at the top froze me. Patient Mr. Ryan Hale. The name meant nothing then, but it would come to define everything. The following morning I stood outside his suite. The hallway was hushed by plush carpet, the kind that swallows footsteps. My pulse hammered. Margaret glanced at me once, her clipboard pressed against her chest. You're sure you want this? I signed the contract. That's not what I asked. I swallowed. Yes. She knocked twice, then opened the door. The suite was enormous vaulted ceilings, glass walls revealing redwood trees, sunlight stretching across pale hardwood. It was a throne room, not a bedroom. And by the window, in a sleek black wheelchair, sat Ryan Hale. He didn't turn at first. His fingers tapped the armrest, steady measured. Then he pivoted and I stopped breathing. He wasn't old. He wasn't fragile. He was mid-30s tall, even while seated, dark hair cropped, close jaw, sharp enough to cut eyes like shards of glass. But what struck me most wasn't his appearance. It was his expression, a mixture of exhaustion and contempt. So he said, voice low and edged. They sent me another one. I opened my mouth to respond, but he cut me off. What's the bet this time, Margaret? A week, 10 days. Margaret didn't answer. She just said, I'll leave you to get acquainted. And then she was gone. Silence stretched heavy and suffocating. I'm not here to place bets, I said finally. I'm here to do my job. His wheelchair rolled forward closer, his gaze dissecting me like a puzzle he didn't like. And what job do you think that is? Medication, physical therapy, monitoring vitals, supporting rehabilitation. He snorted. You forgot the part where you nod sympathetically while I failed to walk again. That's everyone's favorite. I met his eyes steady. I'm not here to pity you. His head tilted. That's new. Most of them crack by day 3. Maybe I'll surprise you. The smirk curling at his lips told me he didn't believe it. The first day passed in stiff silence. I administered medication, logged notes, reviewed his physical therapy plan. He fired barbed remarks like arrows, testing me, pushing me, waiting for me to snap. But I didn't bite. I had faced screaming teenagers, veterans missing limbs, mothers clinging to morphine dreams. I wasn't going to break here. That evening, as I organized his room for the night, his voice cut through the quiet. You're not what I expected. I looked up. No. You haven't asked about the accident. Everyone asks. Eventually. I figured you'd tell me if you wanted. A pause. Then he said, ski trip. Solo. Lost control on a ridge. Woke up in a helicopter. Haven't stood unassisted since. I nodded. Thank you for telling me. His gaze lingered on me, sharp, searching. Why did you take this job? I hesitated, then met his eyes. Because I know what it feels like to be thrown away. For a moment, a crack flashed in his expression. Then it was gone. He turned back to the window. Don't get attached. I don't do gratitude. I don't do friendship. Good, I replied softly. I don't do illusions. He didn't dismiss me. He didn't send me away. That silence strangely felt like the first step. Before I go further, I want to ask you something. If you were in my place facing a patient who pushed every boundary on day 1, what would you do? Would you walk out or stay? Leave your thoughts in the comments. That first night inside the Hale estate, I lay awake on the pull-out bed in my quarters, staring at the ceiling while the silence pressed down on me. Every word Ryan had spoken replayed like echoes in a cavern, sharp-cutting, designed to wound. Yet strangely, I didn't feel defeated. I felt challenged. By sunrise, I dressed in fresh scrubs and stepped into the hushed corridor. The house was unnaturally quiet, as if even sound had to ask permission to move through the halls. Margaret met me outside the kitchen, handed me a clipboard, and said nothing more than vitals at 7. Therapy at 9. Her eyes revealed nothing. When I entered Ryan's room, he was already awake. His gaze flicked toward me unimpressed. "You're still here," he muttered. Where else would I be? I set the tray down, checked his medication, and recorded the numbers on my chart. He watched me in silence until I finally asked, "What?" "You haven't cracked yet," he said. "Should I have?" He smirked faintly. "Most do, by now." I ignored the bait. Instead, I focused on the work. Medication delivered, exercises initiated, notes logged. He prodded with more sarcasm, but I let it slide off like rain on glass. The more he tested me, the more I realized something his cruelty was armor. He was daring me to fail. At 9, I began his physical therapy. I placed resistance bands in his hands, helped guide his movements, corrected his posture when his body faltered. Each time his muscles trembled, he cursed under his breath. Each time he glared, I simply nodded and said, "Again." By noon, sweat clung to his forehead. His arms shook, but I refused to let pity creep into my tone. "You're stronger than you think," I said quietly. His eyes narrowed. "Don't feed me empty encouragement." "It's not empty if it's true." He didn't respond, but he didn't stop either. That evening, after he'd eaten dinner and the staff had retreated, I remained behind to clean up. He watched me from his chair silent until I was nearly finished. Then suddenly he asked, "Do you know what it's like to lose everything overnight?" I froze. My heart stuttered. "Yes," I said finally. He studied me. "Then you know why I don't trust easily." For the first time, I saw something shift in his expression. A fracture in the wall. Vulnerability raw and fleeting before he pulled it back under iron control. When I left his suite that night, I leaned against the door, breathing hard. This wasn't just a job. It was a battlefield. The next days blurred into a rhythm. Mornings filled with medication and therapy, afternoons with charting evenings with quiet meals, where the clink of cutlery was louder than our words. His remarks still carried edges, but the venom softened almost imperceptibly. I noticed the way his fingers sometimes stilled when I adjusted his chair, the way his eyes lingered on me when he thought I wasn't looking. One evening I caught him staring out the window at the redwoods. "Why do you stay?" he asked abruptly. "Because I don't quit." He nodded slowly, as if cataloging the answer. At the hospital, I had worn masks to survive smiles, polite lies, the pretense that everything was fine. Here inside this fortress of glass and silence, I found myself stripped bare. No lies, no disguises, just raw survival. Every night I asked myself the same question: was I strong enough to keep standing here? And every morning I answered by showing up again. Because the truth was leaving would have been easier, but I was done choosing easy. I didn't realize it yet, but something was shifting, slowly, quietly. Ryan wasn't the only one being tested. The 5th night changed everything. The wind outside had been howling since midnight, rattling the tall glass windows like restless ghosts begging to come in. Sleep wouldn't come, so I threw on a sweater and padded barefoot down the hallway. That was when I noticed it, light spilling from beneath the gym door. Ryan never allowed anyone inside without him. At first I told myself to ignore it, but something gnawed at me, quiet and insistent. I pushed the door open just enough to peek through, and what I saw rooted me to the spot. Ryan was standing. His hands gripped the parallel bars, arms straining, sweat dripping down his temples. His legs trembled, but step by painstaking step he moved forward. Agony and determination carved across his face. He hadn't noticed me, not yet. The soft creak of the door gave me away. His head snapped up. Rage flashed in his eyes. "What the hell are you doing here?" I froze. I heard something. I thought, "Get out." His voice cracked like a whip. But I didn't move. Not because I couldn't. Because something inside me had already shifted. He wasn't hopeless. He wasn't finished. He was hiding progress. "Why?" I asked softly. "Why are you keeping this a secret?" His knuckles whitened around the bars. Because the second people see progress, they expect miracles. And when I fail, they leave. I stepped closer, careful, like approaching a wounded animal. "So instead you pretend there's nothing left, that you've given up. You don't get it." His jaw tightened. "Maybe I do," I whispered. Our eyes locked. Fury burned in his butt, beneath it uncertainty. I drew a breath. "I'm not telling anyone, but if you let me help, really help, we can work towards something better. You don't have to do this alone." "Why?" he demanded. "Why do you care?" "Because I know what it feels like to have your future ripped away. To be told to smile while standing in ruins." He stared at me, chest-heaving, sweat shining across his skin. For a moment, I thought he'd scream again, order me out, fire me on the spot. Instead, he lowered himself slowly back into the chair, exhausted. Finally, he muttered, "Fine. We keep this between us, no one else, ever. I understand. You follow my lead. I say stop, we stop. I say go, you help." Agreed. He studied me for a long time, his eyes sharp measuring. Then he said quietly, "You're not like the others." I shrugged. I'm not trying to be. From that night forward, we had a secret. Every morning before the estate stirred awake, before sunlight warmed the kitchen tiles, we slipped into the gym. Each step he took was agony-controlled, measured fighting gravity with nothing but grit and memory. But he did it. And I was there, not cheering, not pitying, just steady, ready to catch him if he fell. And in those moments, I began to see the man beneath the armor, the one who refused to be broken. It wasn't just his progress that changed. Something in me shifted too. The pain from my broken engagement, the humiliation of being discarded had begun to harden into resolve. Watching him fight for each step reminded me I could fight too. For the first time in weeks, I felt alive. If you've ever had to keep pushing when the world told you it was over, I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. And if you want to walk this journey with me, don't forget to subscribe. You'll never miss what comes next. Because trust me, things were about to get darker before they got brighter. It began with a voice I didn't recognize. I was in my room sorting through the medication cabinet when I heard it deep, confident, too smooth to belong to anyone on staff. Curiosity pushed me into the hallway. I followed the sound until I reached the west sitting room. There he was, a man in his early 40s lounging on a leather couch as though he owned it. His expensive watch gleamed in the morning light, and in his hand was a glass of something that was definitely not juice. "Ryan, you look like hell," the man laughed. Across from him, Ryan sat in his chair, his posture stiff. His smile was tight, practiced. "Good to see you too, Eric." That was my first glimpse of Eric Thorne, Ryan's longtime business partner. From the second his eyes landed on me, something in my stomach twisted. He looked at Ryan the way you'd measure an asset calculating detached. And when his gaze slid toward me, it was slow, invasive. "This the new one?" Eric asked casually, like I wasn't standing right there. I set the tea tray on the table. "Charlotte Carter." "Any better than the last three?" he quipped, sipping his drink. "She's not here to entertain you," Ryan cut in coldly. "She's my nurse." Eric only smirked, unbothered. Then the conversation shifted to mergers, investors, government contracts. Words I wasn't meant to understand, but one name caught me like a hook. "Langley." Eric leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Laura says her father's ready to push the funds through. We just need the control package transferred to the shell. Langley Capital will absorb it. Easy in." My pulse thudded. Laura Langley, the Langley family. Megan Langley, the woman Jason had left me for. I kept my face neutral, but inside alarm bells clanged. Ryan didn't respond. His jaw was tight, knuckles pressed hard against the armrest. "I've already prepped the documents," Eric pressed. "We just need your signature. Don't wait too long or the opportunity closes." Ryan's eyes stayed on the window, his voice clipped. "I'll look them over." "You've been saying that for weeks." Eric's tone sharpened. I slipped out before either of them noticed me still standing there. My chest felt tight. The Langley name, the documents, control packages, shell companies. It couldn't be coincidence. Back in my room, I shut the door and pressed my back against it. Was this connected to Jason, to Megan, to everything that had torn my life apart? Or was I just seeing shadows because I was desperate for answers? That night I couldn't stay silent. As I helped Ryan with his stretching, I broke the stillness. "There's something I overheard today." His eyes narrowed. "Go on." I repeated it all, Eric's words, his tone, the mention of Langley. When I said Megan's name, Ryan finally turned his gaze toward me. "You know her." "My ex-fiancé left me for her," I admitted. The words burned even now. He blinked slowly. "Jason Miller." I nodded, stunned that he knew the name. "I've heard of him through Eric," he said. His voice grew quiet. "Are you suggesting that my business partner and your ex are aligned?" "I'm suggesting it's too much of a coincidence," I said. He didn't reply for a long moment. The silence stretched heavy between us. Finally, he murmured, "I'll review the documents." That was all, nothing more. I tried not to feel crushed. I had hoped for outrage, for belief, for him to leap into action. Instead, he sank back into silence, like everything I said had vanished into a void. That night I paced my room, heart racing. Was I imagining it? Or was the truth staring us both in the face, waiting for someone brave enough to drag it into the light? The knock on my door startled me. It was early, barely dawn, the redwoods outside still cloaked in fog. I opened it to find Ryan in his chair, a folder resting on his lap. His expression was carved from stone, but his eyes, those sharp, glassy eyes, held something new. "You were right," he said simply. My breath caught. About what? He handed me the folder. Langley Capital isn't just investing. The paperwork transfers decision-making rights and ownership to a holding company Eric formed 2 months ago, buried under layers, hidden in plain sight. I flipped through the documents, my hands trembling. It was all there, contract signatures, clauses designed to strip Ryan of his legacy while he was still trapped in his chair. "I want you to help me stop them," he said. "Are you sure?" My voice cracked. "After everything you've been through, after everyone who's already betrayed you, you're trusting me." His jaw tightened. "If they think I'm too weak to fight, they've forgotten who I was before the accident." From that day forward, nights became war councils. Once the staff left and the mansion hushed, Ryan and I sat across the oak table in the study, surrounded by towers of documents. His hands trembled from fatigue, but his voice stayed steady as he outlined strategy. I watched the man I'd first met, the one cloaked in bitterness and barbs, reveal the fighter beneath. He spoke of breach of fiduciary duty, bank trails, contract law. His attorney worked from the outside gathering evidence, but inside these walls it was just us, two discarded souls plotting to reclaim something bigger than ourselves. I trusted Eric more than anyone, he confessed one night, his voice low, almost broken. He was there when I pitched my first app. He was the one I leaned on when I couldn't walk. And all this time, "You were right to trust your gut," I told him softly. "I was late to do it," he muttered, "but I won't be late again." His words lit a fire in me. For the first time since Jason's betrayal, I wasn't drowning in the ruins of my own life. I was building something new alongside someone who refused to stay broken. A week later, the plan crystallized. A special board meeting was scheduled. Eric believed Ryan would finally sign. Laura Langley would be there, smug and untouchable. And to my horror, Jason would too. When Ryan told me, my chest tightened. "Jason, he'll be there." "Yes," Ryan said, his lips curled faintly. "And he's about to see what happens when you underestimate the wrong people." That night, as I lay awake, I thought about what was coming. The boardroom, the evidence. The moment Ryan would walk, if only a few steps, into the arena where they least expected him. And I realized something else. I wasn't just helping him reclaim his company. I was reclaiming myself. I thought back to that cafe, to the velvet box on the table, to the ring slipping off my finger. It had felt like an ending then, but now standing beside Ryan, it felt like the prologue to something far greater. I want to pause here and ask you, what would you have done in my place? If you discovered your enemy's name buried in secret documents tied to the people who destroyed your life, would you risk everything to fight back, or would you run? Leave your thoughts below. I truly want to know. 'Cause I had already made my choice, and there was no going back. Bye. The day of the board meeting arrived like a storm I couldn't stop. Ryan had prepared for it with an intensity I had never seen before. For days leading up to it, he practiced standing with the cane. 10 steps, then 15, then 20, each one etched into muscle memory through pain and sheer defiance. I stayed by his side, ready to steady him when his legs buckled, but he never let me carry him. He wanted the world to see that he was still capable of standing on his own. The morning of the meeting, he dressed in a midnight blue suit, crisp and tailored. It was the first time I'd seen him in anything other than sweats or hospital gowns. His frame was lean, his face pale, but there was fire in his eyes. He looked every bit the man who had once built an empire from scratch. "You don't have to do this," I whispered as I straightened his tie. "Yes, I do," he said. His voice carried no doubt. "They need to see me. They need to remember who I am." When we entered the glass and chrome building, silence rippled through the halls. Heads turned. Whispers followed us. Ryan walked beside me each step, deliberate cane clicking against the marble floor. By the time we reached the boardroom, the air was electric. Eric sat at the head of the table, smug as ever. Laura Langley lounged nearby, dove-gray suit and crimson lips sharp as a blade. And then there was Jason, my Jason, sitting just off to the side, his expression unreadable. My stomach clenched, but I forced my chin up. When Ryan stepped into the room, the silence snapped. "You're walking," Eric blurted, disbelief etched across his face. "Not perfectly," Ryan said evenly, "but enough." He didn't take a seat at the far end where they expected him. Instead, he walked step by painful step straight to the head of the table. He paused, stared Eric down, and said calmly, "This meeting is under my authority, and I'll begin with this." He placed a folder on the table and flipped it open. Inside were documents that exposed every forged trail, every clause designed to strip him of control. He laid them out piece by piece, his voice steady as he explained Eric's betrayal. Laura didn't flinch. Jason shifted uncomfortably. Eric's face drained of color. "You can't prove intent," Eric spat, desperation creeping in. "I don't have to," Ryan countered. "I only have to prove breach of fiduciary duty." And I just did. The room erupted into murmurs. The general counsel stood. "Mr. Hale, would you like to request an immediate vote of no confidence?" "I would," Ryan said, effective immediately. The vote was swift, unanimous. Eric was stripped of power, the contracts nullified. Control of Hale Nexus Technologies returned to Ryan. Chaos followed. Laura rose her heels, clicking like gunshots. "You don't know who you're messing with," she hissed. "Oh, I do," Ryan said softly. "A woman who hides behind her father's name, and a man who sells everything for a shortcut." Her eyes narrowed. Jason avoided my gaze. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't the man I had once loved. He was just another pawn in their game. When the boardroom cleared, only Ryan and I remained. He leaned on his cane, breathing hard, but his eyes glowed with triumph. "You did it," I whispered. "No," he said, looking at me. "We did." For the first time, his smile wasn't laced with bitterness. It was real. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe until then. That day, Ryan wasn't the only one who had taken his first steps. The aftermath of that meeting lingered in the halls of the Hale estate like the fading echo of a battle won. Ryan had reclaimed his company. Eric was out. The Langley grip had slipped, at least for the moment. But victory, I soon learned, was never permanent. It was only borrowed time. The mansion no longer felt like a mausoleum. Windows were thrown open more often, and sunlight poured into rooms that had been sealed in shadow. Even the garden, once overgrown and brittle, began to show signs of life under the care of hired hands. But the real transformation wasn't in the house. It was in Ryan. He still had hard days. His body still ached, still fought him at every turn. But the bitterness that once seeped into every word began to lift. He still cursed under his breath, but now it was more at stubborn rice on the stove than at his own existence. One evening, I found him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, brow furrowed, as he waged war against a pot of rice. The smell of scorched grains filled the air. "This stove has a personal vendetta," he muttered. I leaned on the counter, smiling despite myself. Maybe it's not the stove. He shot me a glare that was more playful than sharp. "If this kills you, I want it on record, it was accidental." "If I die, you'll just get the company in the will," I teased. He paused, the spoon in his hand hovering. "Actually, no. I transferred it into a trust. One that includes you." The words hung in the air. My breath caught. "What?" "I'm not giving you the company," he said gently. "But I want you to know I built something better with you than I ever did with anyone else. And I want you to be part of what comes next." I stared at him, my heart stumbling over itself. Before I could respond, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. "Before you say anything," he said quickly, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a single sapphire, "you don't have to answer today, or even this year. I know I'm still learning how to be a person again. I know you didn't sign up for this, but I'd like to ask anyway. Will you consider walking this road with me?" I didn't cry. I thought I might. But instead, I felt steady, like I had finally walked out of the darkest forest into a clearing I hadn't known existed. I slid the ring onto my finger. "I'm not saying yes," I whispered, "but I'm not saying no." Ryan laughed, a sound freer than any I'd heard from him before. "That sounds exactly like you." We didn't announce anything. No headlines, no champagne toasts. Just mornings that turned into evenings, progress measured not in grand gestures, but in steady steps. He walked half a mile on his own. I passed my certification to open a private practice. We hired more staff. The house that once belonged to him began to feel like ours. As for Jason, he sent a text, 2 lines. "Are you okay?" I never replied, because by then I knew the truth. That heartbreak had been a detour, not a dead end. But what neither of us realized then was that the Langley name was not finished with us. We thought we had won. We thought we had built something untouchable. We were wrong. Stay with me, because what happened next pulled us both back into a storm we thought we had escaped. The quiet weeks after the board meeting lulled me into a false sense of safety. Ryan and I had slipped into a rhythm therapy in the morning strategy sessions when documents arrived from his attorney shared dinners, where laughter began to replace silence. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. But safety, I would soon learn, is fragile. It started with a letter, a thick envelope delivered by courier stamped with a name I thought I had left behind Langley. Ryan opened it in the study. His eyes scanned the pages, his jaw tightening as he flipped from one sheet to the next. When he finally looked at me, the calm in his expression was terrifying. "They're not done, not even close." The documents inside outlined a fresh attempt: new shell companies, hidden agreements, shadow investors waiting in line. Eric might have been cut out, but Laura Langley was still pulling strings, and she wasn't finished. That night, Ryan sat in the gym after therapy, staring at the parallel bars, as if they were the only things keeping him grounded. "I thought exposing Eric would end it," he said. "But they're multiplying, like weeds." I lowered myself into a chair across from him. "Then we keep pulling them out, one by one." He glanced at me, something unreadable in his eyes. "You talk like this is your fight too." I held his gaze. "It is." "You think they only came after you. Jason left me for Megan Langley. That family has had their hands on both our lives. They underestimated us, both of us." For the first time, his lips curved in something close to pride. "Maybe that's why I trust you." The following week, Ryan began preparing again, not just physically, but strategically. More late nights bent over files, more whispered calls with attorneys, more carefully hidden progress with the cane. Every step he took now was not only for himself, it was for leverage, for proof, for war. One night after another grueling session, where his legs gave out just short of 20 steps, he caught my arm before I could help him back to the chair. "Why do you stay?" he asked. His voice was low, almost breaking. "Because I don't quit." He nodded, but his eyes lingered on me longer than usual, as if he were trying to memorize the answer. It was in moments like that I realized how blurred the lines had become. I was no longer just his nurse. I was his confidant, his ally, his anchor when the ground shifted. And he was no longer just my patient. He was the reminder that broken didn't mean finished. Still, the Langley shadow loomed. Each night I wondered when the next strike would come, how hard it would land, and whether we were strong enough to survive it. I remember looking out over the redwoods one morning, fog curling around the trees, and asking myself a question I hadn't dared to before. Was I falling for him? The answer came not in words, but in the way my heart steadied when he walked into a room even with the cane. In the way his laughter filled the halls where silence used to choke us. In the way his fight became mine. And that terrified me, because love I knew too well could be a weapon in the wrong hands. I want to ask you something. If you were me, would you take that risk again? Would you let yourself trust, let yourself love, after everything had been ripped away once already? Tell me in the comments, because your answer might be different than mine. The storm we feared came sooner than either of us expected. It was a Thursday evening when the estate manager Margaret walked into the study with her lips pressed thin, holding a slim envelope. "Delivered by hand," she said, setting it down. The seal bore the Langley crest. Ryan opened it while I stood behind him, my heart hammering. Inside was a letter drafted with surgical cruelty. The Langley legal team accused Ryan of incompetence, claiming his accident left him unfit to lead. They demanded he step aside, permanently handing control to a board of trustees, conveniently stacked with Langley allies. Ryan's hands shook as he gripped the paper. They're going to war, he muttered. I leaned closer. Then so are we. For the next week, the house became a war room again. Attorneys came and went. Boxes of files filled the study. I helped cross-reference contracts, flagged inconsistencies, pieced together threads of hidden ownership. It wasn't just about the company anymore, it was about survival. If Langley won, Ryan would lose everything he had fought to rebuild. But what unsettled me most wasn't the paperwork. It was the realization that Jason's name appeared in several email trails. He wasn't just a bystander married into the Langley family. He was part of the machinery working to erase Ryan, and by extension, me. The betrayal hit like a second blade, reopening wounds I thought had scarred over. At night, I lay awake replaying every moment with Jason, the promises, the lies, the day he slid that ring box back across the cafe table. Now I knew. He hadn't just broken my heart, he had sold it to the highest bidder. Ryan noticed my silence during one of our late-night sessions. He was reviewing merger notes when he stopped and said, "You're somewhere else." Jason's name is in those emails, I admitted quietly. Ryan's jaw tightened. He's nothing more than their pawn. Maybe, but he still chose it. My throat tightened. He chose them over me, over everything. Ryan studied me for a long moment, then said softly, "Sometimes being discarded is the only freedom they'll ever give you." His words sank deep, painful but strangely liberating. So, the day of the hearing approached. Ryan practiced harder, pushing himself to stand longer, walk farther. Each step cost him agony, but he refused to back down. One night after a brutal session where he nearly collapsed, I caught his arm. "Enough. You'll break yourself." He looked at me, sweat dripping down his temple, his voice ragged. "If I don't walk into that room on my own, they'll win before I open my mouth." I knew he was right, but watching him grind his body to the edge was a different kind of torment. On the eve of the hearing, we sat together in the kitchen. No documents, no cane, just us. He cooked again, burning another pot of rice until the smoke alarm chirped. I laughed so hard my ribs ached. And for the first time, I realized how badly I wanted more nights like this messy human alive. When the laughter faded, Ryan's eyes lingered on me. "Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you." "For what, you?" "For staying, for not walking away like the rest." I swallowed hard. "I'm not here because it's easy. I'm here because you're worth the fight." Silence stretched between us, thick with everything unspoken. And though neither of us moved, the truth settled heavy in the air. We weren't just allies anymore. We were tethered. The morning of the hearing broke gray and cold, the kind of weather that felt like a warning. Ryan dressed in silence, every movement deliberate as he buttoned his crisp charcoal suit. I helped knot his tie, my fingers brushing against his collar. His jaw was set, eyes focused, but I could see the strain beneath the surface. "You don't have to carry this alone," I whispered. His hand tightened around the cane. "I know, but I have to walk into that room standing. If they see weakness, they'll devour it." We arrived 15 minutes early, the building looming with glass and chrome. Heads turned the second Ryan pushed through the doors, each step of his cane against the marble floor echoing louder than the whispers trailing behind us. Inside the boardroom, the Langley influence was unmistakable. Laura sat poised at the far end, her dove-gray suit, immaculate lips painted like war paint. Beside her was Jason. My stomach twisted as his eyes flicked toward me, guilt recognition, then something colder. Eric wasn't there. He had already been cut out, but Laura had filled the vacuum. The session opened with their attorney, who spoke with the polished venom of someone born to wield power. He outlined Ryan's incapacity, citing his accident, his rehabilitation, his supposed inability to lead. He spoke as though Ryan were already a relic, a shadow of the man he used to be. When it was Ryan's turn, he rose slowly, the cane steady in his grip. Gasps rippled across the table as he took step after step toward the center, his voice calm but unyielding. He presented evidence exposing the hidden shell companies, the fraudulent trails. He spoke of fiduciary duty, of betrayal, of the dangers of power concentrated in hands willing to deceive. Laura's composure didn't break, but Jason shifted uncomfortably, his knuckles white against the table. Ryan's closing words cut like a blade. "You thought I was finished. You mistook silence for surrender. That was your mistake." The vote was swift. The Langley motion collapsed. Ryan retained control. When the gavel fell, Laura rose gracefully, her eyes like steel. She leaned forward just enough for only us to hear. "This isn't over," she said. "You've only delayed the inevitable." Ryan didn't flinch. "Then I'll be ready." As the room emptied, Jason lingered. For a moment, I thought he might speak to me. Instead, he turned away, following Laura out the door like the shadow he had become. Ryan leaned on his cane, breathing hard, but when his gaze met mine, I saw something stronger than exhaustion: defiance, triumph. "You did it," I whispered. "No," he said softly. "We did." For the first time, I believed him completely. But even as we left the building, I couldn't shake Laura's words. "This isn't over." And she was right. The Langley family wasn't finished. They never were. What came next would test us in ways neither of us could have predicted. And the twist waiting on the horizon, well, it would change everything. The days following the hearing felt like breathing after nearly drowning. For the first time, the estate wasn't heavy with dread. Windows stayed open. Light spilled across the marble floors. The garden, once brittle and abandoned, began to stir with life again. Under the hands of gardeners, Ryan, finally allowed to return. But the real transformation was inside the house. Ryan no longer carried bitterness in every word. His body still fought him. There were mornings when pain bent him nearly double, but his spirit had shifted. He cursed less at himself and more at the small things like the stubborn oven or the coffee machine that refused to cooperate. And in those small frustrations, I saw something miraculous: he was living again. One Thursday evening, I found him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, fumbling over a skillet of rice. Smoke curled toward the ceiling. He glared at the pan as though it had betrayed him personally. "This stove hates me," he grumbled. Or maybe I said, leaning against the counter, "You're just a terrible cook." His eyes narrowed playfully. "If this dish kills you, I want it recorded as accidental." I couldn't stop the laugh that burst from me. "If I die, you'll inherit my medical debt." That made him pause, then laugh too, a sound freer, lighter than anything I'd heard from him before. In that moment, the shadows that had haunted the estate seemed to dissolve. From then on, it became our ritual. Thursday nights in the kitchen. He cooked, or tried to. I teased him from the counter. Sometimes we burned dinner, sometimes we didn't. But those evenings stitched together a kind of home I hadn't realized I was missing. Slowly, the wounds inside me began to scar over. The wedding that never happened, the betrayal that had gutted me, I stopped mourning it. I stopped mourning the name I almost took, the life I thought I'd wanted. Instead, I found myself laughing again, reading again, running short laps on the trail behind the house. With each step, I shed the girl who had been left on Elm Street, with her suitcases lined like evidence of her failure. Ryan noticed. One evening as I set a book down, he said, "You look lighter." Lighter, I raised a brow. "As if you stopped carrying something that wasn't yours." I smiled because he was right. And yet beneath the healing there was something else blooming. Something I had been too afraid to name. Love. Not the dizzy, reckless love I once mistook for destiny, but something steadier, born of scars and survival. The kind of love that grows when two people fight side by side, carrying each other through fire. Oh, I need to pause here and speak directly to you. If you've ever clawed your way back from heartbreak, you'll understand what I mean. Healing isn't fast, it isn't clean. But when light starts to return, when laughter feels possible again, you have to hold on to it. And if this story resonates with you, join me here. Subscribe, be part of this community, because your journey matters too. The Langley shadow was still out there waiting, but for now we had carved a sanctuary. And for the first time, I didn't just believe we could survive, I believed we could build something worth protecting. The following weeks blurred into a rhythm that was foreign, yet comforting. Mornings were quiet, the sun spilling light across the polished floors. Ryan moved with a steadier gait, now still leaning on his cane, still wincing with every step. But the fire in his eyes had returned. It wasn't just survival anymore, it was mastery. I watched him during therapy sessions, guiding his arms, adjusting posture, prompting movements. But instead of pity or fear, there was a mutual understanding now. Every step he took wasn't just for himself. It was a testament to the resilience we both shared. And I realized slowly, that I was changing too. Gone were the days of silent despair and muted tears. The mansion no longer felt like a prison of memories, nor did it echo with the ghosts of past betrayals. Instead, it became a place of rebuilding both for Ryan and for me. Even the small things mattered: the smell of brewing coffee in the kitchen, the creak of the oak floors beneath our feet, the sunlight hitting the redwoods just right through the west-facing windows. One evening, Ryan decided to cook. I watched as he wrestled with an unfamiliar recipe flour, dusting his hands, rice over cooked spatula slipping from his grasp. His frustration was palpable. "You owe me a new kitchen if this kills me," he joked, barely concealing a grin. "I'll hold you to that," I replied, smiling. As we laughed, I thought about the long journey we'd taken, about the betrayal, the fight, the nights we both endured in silence and pain. The victories over the Langley conspiracy were exhilarating, but it was the everyday moments like this, the moments of imperfection and laughter, that made all the struggle worth it. Then came a moment that shifted everything. Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. My heart skipped. I had learned not to expect gestures, not to anticipate anything from him. But now, with the sun fading and the room bathed in golden light, he opened it to reveal a simple gold ring with a single sapphire. "Before you say anything," he began, his voice low, steady, "you don't have to answer today or even this year. I'm still learning how to be a person again. And I know you didn't sign up for this, but I'd like to ask anyway. Will you consider walking this road with me? Not because I need saving, but because with you I remember who I am." I didn't cry. I thought I might. But what I felt was steadier, stronger, a sense of arrival, like walking through the darkest forest only to find a clearing I hadn't known existed. Slowly, I slid the ring onto my finger. "I'm not saying yes," I whispered, "but I'm not saying no." His laugh was light, almost musical. "That sounds exactly like you." And just like that, everything shifted. There was no rush, no grand announcement, just mornings and progress, small victories and quiet triumphs. Ryan walked half a mile on his own. I passed my certification to open a private practice. The house felt like ours, not his, not a relic of what once was. Jason had texted me once, 2 lines asking if I was okay. I never replied. I didn't need to. That chapter of my life had ended. What remained was this new life built from heartbreak, resilience, and unexpected love. The lessons we had learned, the fights, the betrayals, the nights spent planning and pacing, the moments of silence and understanding, formed a foundation neither of us had imagined. We had discovered that strength doesn't come from never falling, but from rising every single time. And that love, real love, is forged not in ease, but in battle. The weeks turned into months, and life in the Hale estate settled into a rhythm that felt more like home than I had ever imagined possible. Every morning, sunlight spilled through the redwood windows, illuminating the polished hardwood floors. The house no longer echoed with silence or tension. It breathed, it moved, it lived. Ryan had grown stronger. His body still reminded him of the accident. There were days when each step was measured, calculated, painful, but he had reclaimed himself. Each movement was a declaration of defiance against the limitations that had once trapped him. And each day, I watched him, realizing that in helping him reclaim his strength, I had reclaimed pieces of my own. Our mornings began with therapy, not rushed, not competitive, but deliberate. Each step Ryan took, each hand he raised, or muscle he stretched, was mirrored by my encouragement and quiet presence. There was no pity, no hollow cheer, only the steady support of someone who refused to let fear dictate the outcome. And as the days passed, his trust in me deepened subtly, without words, like the slow opening of a flower under the sun. The mansion became a laboratory for life, for rediscovery, for laughter. One evening, Ryan decided to cook a habit he had started, despite the disasters in the kitchen. Flour dusted his arms, rice scorched, pots and pans clattered against counters. He cursed at the stove as though it owed him something. And I laughed, not just at the food, but at the joy of witnessing a man who had once been broken embrace the chaos of living again. You really think I can save dinner tonight? He asked, eyes narrowing playfully. Let's just hope no one calls the fire department, I teased. These moments, mundane, imperfect, taught us more than any victory in the boardroom ever could. They reminded us that life, even after devastation, could be ordinary, comfortable, shared, and unexpectedly beautiful. Then came the quiet evening that changed everything once more. Ryan pulled a small black box from his pocket and opened it. Inside rested a simple gold ring with a sapphire set in its center. Before you respond, he said, voice calm, deliberate. You don't have to answer today. Or even this year. I know I'm still learning how to be a person. I know you didn't sign up for this. But I'd like to ask anyway, would you consider walking this road with me? Not because I need saving, but because with you, I remember who I am. I took a breath, steadying myself. I slid the ring onto my finger. I'm not saying yes, I whispered, but I'm not saying no. His laughter was light-freeing. That sounds exactly like you. Life didn't explode into headlines or grand celebrations. Instead, it expanded in quiet victories. Mornings filled with sun and the smell of coffee walks down the private trail behind the house. Laughter spilling from the kitchen, even when dinner failed spectacularly, and the knowledge that we were building something that neither Langley Eric nor Jason could touch. I opened my private practice. We hired staff. Ryan no longer relied on his chair, walking confidently for miles, each step a testament to patience and persistence. And each night as we sat together in the kitchen or on the patio watching the redwoods sway in the wind, the mansion no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like ours. Jason had tried once to reach me via text, 2 lines, a hollow attempt at checking in. I didn't respond. There was no need. The heartbreak he had caused had already delivered its lesson. I had grown stronger. I had built a life that no betrayal could undo. And more importantly, I had discovered that love, when it arrives at the right time and under the right conditions, could heal, steady, and empower. And now as we walked along the private trail at dusk, hand in hand, the wind cold enough to sting, I realized the most important truth of all: the past, with all its pain, was a detour, not a destination. The life we were building together, layered with scars, lessons, resilience, and trust, was better than any dream I had imagined before. If you've been through heartbreak, betrayal, or a time when it felt like life was over, know this: the next chapter can be more extraordinary than you ever believed. And if you want to see how others take their pain and turn it into power, don't leave yet. Check out my next video where survival, love, and strategy collide in ways that will change everything. The seasons changed quietly around the Hale estate. Sunlight poured over the redwoods and the air smelled of pine and possibility. The house, once a fortress of shadows and whispers, now breathed warmth and laughter. Each morning I awoke to the gentle hum of Lifebird's wind, and Ryan, moving steadily through the halls, no longer trapped in bitterness or pain. Our routine was simple, but it was ours. Breakfast together, walks along the private trail, afternoons spent planning the private practice, and evenings in the kitchen, experimenting with new recipes, often failing, but always laughing. Each moment reinforced a truth I had only begun to understand. Life wasn't measured by grand gestures or wealth, but by presence, resilience, and the quiet victories we carved for ourselves. I had once thought that losing Jason, the broken engagement, and betrayal were endings. They weren't. They were detours, teaching me to trust myself, to fight for my place in the world, and to recognize the people worth walking beside. Ryan and I had built more than a company restored or a body rehabilitated. We had built a life anchored in mutual respect, strength, and unspoken loyalty. And so as the sun dipped behind the redwoods, casting long golden shadows across the estate, I felt a steady calm. The wounds of the past no longer dictated my present. The heartbreak that had once felt like a canyon between me and the world had become a bridge to something better. I held Ryan's hand warm and real and smiled. We had survived, we had grown, and we had found freedom not in vengeance, but in reclaiming ourselves. And in that quiet, unremarkable, yet perfect evening, I realized that sometimes the life you never dared to imagine is the one worth living the most. The mansion was no longer a house of ghosts. It was a home, and we were finally truly alive.